I just want to welcome you to your webinar tonight. This is really exciting for me. I've been working hard on this presentation and I've got lots of fun things to share with you this evening. Most of you I've met in real life, some of you on our Facebook group, just virtually, you're my virtual friends. So this is so exciting for me to have the chance to talk with you for a whole hour. Very exciting. So basically, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to be asking you questions on and off, and how I'll get you to respond to me is just once again by raising your hand as we go through. So I will be checking in that you're listening, and I'll do my best not to talk too quickly so that you have time to write down all of the fun things that we're going to talk about tonight. One more thing to just say before we get started is when I say you, when we're going over these nutrition roadblocks that we're going to talk about tonight, I'm not just talking about you behind your computer screen there. I'm talking about all of us. We're all in this together. And a lot of the challenges and roadblocks that are going to come up tonight are things that I've personally dealt with on my own. And so when I'm saying you, it's not just you. You're not in this alone. We're in this together. So some of these things I've worked on for years and I've gotten past them and found success. And some things I'm still working on. So it's a practice and it will always be fluid going back and forth. So when I say you, it's not just you, it's me, and we're all in this together. Okay, so getting started with 5 nutrition roadblocks holding you back from real results. If you're just joining us on the line, welcome. We are going to get started. Okay, so why talk about nutrition? It's important to talk about nutrition because what we eat determines up to 80% of our results, physically and mentally. So other factors affecting our results can be genetics and exercise, of course, but really what we're putting in our mouth has a huge effect on our health, our energy, and ultimately how we look. There's also so much conflicting information out there about what to eat. There's new diets coming out all the time on the news. We hear about the latest and greatest superfood. So tonight we're just going to dispel some of those big myths that are out there and give you some good, concrete, simple information to follow. And then thirdly, one of the other reasons we want to talk about nutrition is because our relationships with food are created over our entire lifetime. They start when we're kids and when we go through adolescence and then move out and start to grocery shop on our own. Our relationships with food are not created in one day and they cannot be changed in a day either. So sometimes we get held up on the fact that change isn't coming fast enough, but it took you a lifetime to get to the point where you're at right now. So it's not going to take you one day to get through all of the challenges and issues that you have with eating right now. And then finally, we need education about food and a mindset shift to be successful in the long run. Just knowing information about food and what to eat and when is not enough. We also need to create the mindset to actually put that knowledge into action. So we'll talk about that a lot tonight. All right, so moving right into the good stuff. We're going to talk about some nutrition basics, some mindset basics before we get into our big roadblocks, just so that we're all on the same page here. So basically we have 3 macronutrients that make up all of our food. It's basically just like a chemical distinction of how food is made up. So we've got, first of all, carbohydrates. You've probably heard this term many times. And carbohydrates really have one main function, and that is to provide us with energy. It's one of the easiest used forms of energy that our body will make use of. And carbohydrates can be basically broken down into 2 main categories. That would be starchy carbs. So those are your things like your breads, your muffins, even pastries. Those are a little bit more on the refined end. Or then we've got more complex carbohydrates, which are things like quinoas, squirrely breads, yams, potatoes, spelt, millet, oats, that sort of thing. So starchy carbs just have a little bit higher amount of starch in them. That's really all that it means. They do tend to raise your blood sugar a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have fibrous carbohydrates. So fibrous carbohydrates tend to have a lower amount of starch. They still have a fair amount of fiber in them, of course, hence the name fibrous carbohydrates. And these are usually your fruits and vegetables. So things like spinach, zucchinis, kale, cabbage, apples, pears, berries, that sort of thing. Those would be thought of as fibrous carbs. Then our second macronutrient that we've got is protein. Protein's main role is for cell support and growth. So basically, it helps us to maintain our muscle mass. It helps us to build our skin, our hair, our nails. Some of our protein hormones are made from the basic building blocks of protein. Protein also helps to keep us fuller for longer. So that's one of its huge benefits in the eating equation. And then finally, we have fat, our third and final macronutrient. Fat is going to come up in our chat tonight in Roadblock 3, so I'm not going to talk too much about it right now. The biggest thing that I want you to be aware of between carbohydrate, protein, and fat is that we need all three. We can't have a healthy or functional or sustainable diet if we cut out entire macronutrients. So cutting out carbohydrates fully, or protein fully, or fat fully is a short-term solution to, say, losing weight. It's not going to work in the long run, and it's certainly not a healthy protocol to follow. So we need all three. Then we're going to move on now to the calories in versus calories out model. So basically, this model is a super basic idea that tells us if we consume, so if we eat less calories than we're expending, we're going to be in a caloric deficit. And then when we're in a caloric deficit, we will essentially lose weight. This is the most basic model, and you may have heard of it before if you've been on a diet or if you've taken any nutrition courses. It is true. For the most part, if we eat less and we output more, we do lose weight. The issue is when we lose weight with this protocol, we don't just lose fat, we also lose muscle. So that's why it's a really short-term solution for a long-term weight loss, because when we're losing weight from muscle mass too, we simply can't maintain those results. It negatively affects our metabolism, and we're going to learn a little later how it negatively affects our fat-burning hormones as well. So the other thing too is that even though I'm saying the calories in versus calories out model is short-sighted, we can eat too much of a good thing. So if you're just eating protein and vegetables and berries and oats and drinking your water, that's fantastic. But if we intake too much food, we can still hold that extra energy as body fat. So it is possible to eat too much of a good thing. We just need to find that balance between eating enough of the good stuff and still finding out where we want to be with our weight. So it is possible to have too much of a healthy food. A fat loss food really becomes a food that works for us when we find the right amounts of this food that we can eat that are sustainable. So we don't feel like we need to eat 100 almonds to feel satisfied or satiated. So healthy food versus fat loss food are two different things. Quinoa, for example, it's a grain if you don't know what quinoa is. It's a very healthy food. It gives us vital vitamins and minerals, gives us lots of energy. It's a starchy carb, but it's not always considered a fat loss food because if we eat too much of it, we're going to hold on to that excess body fat. So two different things, healthy food versus fat loss food. Moving on now to the fact that our calories in versus calories out model does not take into consideration our hormones. So we've got two main hormones we're going to talk about, insulin and cortisol. So insulin is basically a hormone that regulates our blood sugar. So what happens is if we eat something that's quite high in carbohydrates, so think like a piece of toast, like just a normal Dempster's bread piece of toast. What happens is our bloodstream is going to be full of this carbohydrate, which is essentially breaks down into sugar. So then our body releases this insulin hormone, Insulin's role is to take that blood sugar from our bloodstream and to bring it into our cells. When that happens, our blood sugar levels drop. When our blood sugar levels drop, we tend to feel headachy, tired, grumpy, and we also tend to crave more carbohydrates. This reaction is even worse when we eat something really sugary or really refined, so like a brownie or candy, that sort of thing. So it's like no judgment once again, it just is what it is. Once you start to understand the physical response that's happening when you choose to eat certain foods, then it starts to make sense why, oh, you can't just have one candy because you want to keep going. Well, it's your hormones that are telling you what to do as well. So the next hormone we're going to talk about is cortisol. So cortisol is a stress-based hormone. Basically, it's released during times of stress, physical stress or mental stress. So what cortisol does is it causes us to burn our muscles for fuel, which is obviously not a long-term solution if we're trying to maintain our muscle mass for future fat burning, or if we're trying to see increased muscle definition or muscle tone. That raised cortisol level is not going to help us. And cortisol also helps us to hold on to belly fat. So you may be the type of person that tends to hold more of your weight through your midsection versus globally, like all over your whole body. That can often mean that you just genetically have higher levels of cortisol. So if you've taken our burner type questionnaire, as you all have, and you're a muscle burner, then you are more cortisol dominant. If you've taken our muscle burner or our burner type questionnaire and you're a sugar burner, you are more insulin dominant. Neither is better or worse than the other. They're just different. If you are a mixed burner, as most of you are, then you're right in the middle. So insulin and cortisol both affect you, but neither of them is a huge swing. So the biggest thing that we need to think of when it comes to calories in versus calories out and hormones, let's say we're operating in this caloric deficit, we're not eating as many calories as we're burning. In theory, we're losing weight. But chronically, if we don't eat enough calories, our body thinks of that as a physical stress. When that physical stress is happening, we hold on to body fat because our body releases cortisol. So yes, calories in versus calories out matters, but it's also really affected by our hormones. The other reason why the calories in versus calories out model is short-sighted is that if we are hungry, we will eat. So let's just say I give you a meal plan and it's based on 1,500 calories a day and you're expending 1,800 calories a day. And then you get to 6 o'clock at night and you've eaten all the food on your meal plan. Well, if you're starving, chances are you're going to say, screw it, your willpower is drained by the end of the day and you're just going to eat. So when we operate on calories in versus calories out, not only does it suck to have to count calories at every meal, in my personal opinion, it's not going to get us where we want to go because we're always going to be a slave to our hunger, which brings us to our next slide. So we need to eat to balance our hunger, our energy, and our cravings. So how we do this is we need to mostly eat real food. Real food gives us the essential vitamins and minerals that we need. So we're less likely to have lots of cravings when we eat lots of whole foods, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, enough water, for example. We also need to eat satisfying food. So if you're eating boiled chicken breast and broccoli every day, that's not going to be super satisfying. It's not going to last for long term, and therefore you're not going to see long-term results. So what's the point, really, is what I would argue. So satisfying foods can be things like having a little bit of cheese on your salad, right? It's not going to make a huge difference in terms of overall calories. And it's also going to be really satisfying so that you're like, yeah, I could eat this salad tomorrow for dinner and feel really great about it. And then thirdly, we want to eat enough volume foods. So volume foods are foods that take up a lot of space on your plate and don't offer a huge caloric load. So yeah, leafy greens, vegetables, they're definitely volume foods. Another example would be if you had on a plate a donut, like a normal average donut, is about 250 calories, okay? And then your normal average chicken breast is also about 250 calories. So if I gave you a time, I was like a contest, and I was going to time you, which food do you think you could eat faster? Well, the donut. You would be able to eat the donut a lot faster. It has less volume for the same amount of calories. The chicken breast takes longer to chew. It also takes longer to digest. So by the time you've eaten that entire chicken breast, your hunger signals are telling your brain that you're full. Whereas you could probably eat 3 250 calorie donuts in the time that you would eat 1 chicken breast. So you can see how we want to have those volume and satisfying foods as the center of what we're eating. And then the other stuff just falls in between the cracks. So I think it's just really important for you to realize that there's a ton of nutrition information out there. You will likely never know it all. I certainly don't. Education, though, is the first step. So we're always going to be talking about new topics as things come up. If you get stuck on the mindset of, oh, everything's always changing, I can never stay on top of it, well, it's always going to be like that. What we know about nutrition now is different than what we knew about nutrition 10 years ago. So it's always changing, and we just need to stay on the cutting edge in order to be aware. And then the second step is really crafting our mindset to stay in action with all of the information that we know. Because just because we know what food we're supposed to eat doesn't mean we actually eat that food, now does it? Which brings us on to our mindset chat, which is my favorite thing to talk about. So basically, introduction to mindset here. Our mindset can be thought of as how we see the world. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Peaceful people live in a peaceful world, and hostile people live in a hostile world. But the caveat is it's the same world, right? So it's all about your perception. So basically, what are your views on life? How do you show up every day? Is it a slog to get to work in the morning? Is it draining? Like, yeah, we all have tough days for sure. But in general, what are your views on life? Is it life is beautiful and you're really thankful for all the experiences you're having? Or is it like a grind to keep going every day? So some mindset examples that we tend to take on, one of them that's really common with women especially is the I need to take care of everyone else so I don't matter mindset, or like we put ourselves second or third or last on the list. That's just a mindset. It's all it is placing other people's value and worth before ourselves. Obviously, when we're taking care of children, that's really, really challenging. Yeah, you do need to take care of them, of course, but taking care of ourselves is still really, really important. So that's just a mindset shift to make. The second one that's really common is everybody knows better than me, or I know I should be doing better. That's another example. And so that mindset is basically characterized by everybody knows better than me, I don't know. Or like stepping back and not taking that expert role and saying, yeah, I do know myself. I do really know what is important to me and what I like. So our mindset affects every single decision that we make each day. It affects whether or not we feel like we're overwhelmed at the end of the day or the end of the week. It affects whether or not we think we can be successful at changing. And it affects our inner dialogue. So the way that we talk to ourselves in our head. So this is a personal example here. For years, I would take on too much in the realm of exercise and trying to change my diet of what I was eating. So I would try to eat no sugar, and I would try to eat this many servings of vegetables and this much water. So you guys might be operating in this mindset right now. And I would try to change everything. And then I would fail because it was so completely unrealistic to change every single thing at once. It was just, I couldn't do it all. And then I would let that dictate, that failure of not being able to change everything, what I thought about myself. So things I would think about myself would be like, oh, I don't have any willpower. I suck at this. Like, I can never follow a plan. Clearly, because I'm trying to change all these things and I'm failing at it. So I did this for years, and really what it led to for me was on again, off again eating habits. I would eat really good from Monday to Friday, and then I just couldn't keep it up anymore. And I'd have this like mental struggle of, no, I just got to be more strict and got to get back on the bus. The issue is that when I started to change a lot of my mindset and how I approached changing my habits, my inner dialogue with myself changed as well. And I started to embrace the fact that, hey, I actually could really be good at changing my habits and making it last in the long term. So we're going to talk about that a lot today. All right, next slide. So this is the victim mindset trap that we're going to talk about now. We all do this. If you think that you don't do it, you might just not know yet. So this is when we got to, kind of throw our ego out the window, take a couple layers off and go a little bit deep for a second. So the victim mindset trap is basically when we place the blame on others. So probably my favorite example of this is with my significant other. He loves to eat ice cream. So for years, if he would, come home, because he travels a lot for work, if he'd come home and he'd be at home, hey, we're going to go for ice cream. We're having ice cream. This is great. And I would think like, oh, well, we have to go have ice cream now. Like, I would always get an ice cream when he got an ice cream. But really, that was me placing the blame on him. Like, is it really his decision whether I eat ice cream or not? No, it's my decision. So I can totally go with him. But if I don't feel like I need to have an ice cream that day, I can say no. And then really close to the victim mindset is the martyr mindset. So the martyr mindset is the exact same thing, except we place the blame on ourselves. So we're really hard on ourselves and we say, oh, I shouldn't have had that ice cream. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? The issue about this victim or martyr mindset, whichever one you fall into, whether you place blame on others or place blame on yourselves or both, is that it really leaves us with no power. So we have nowhere to go. So if we're saying, oh, I'm so ridiculous for having this ice cream again. I had ice cream yesterday. It's just judgment of ourselves, and it does not help us make better choices in the future at all. It's like using guilt as a tool or a motivator. It does not help. So one of the biggest tools to get rid of the victim or martyr mindset is this 4-step approach. So the first thing is awareness, just being aware of your eating habits or what decisions you're making each day or what the decisions of other people tend to affect your eating decisions, right? Just being aware of that. And then secondly, taking ownership for these decisions that you're making. It's always your choice, like 99.9% of the time, what goes in your mouth. Yeah, you might feel pressured in certain situations to like eat your mom's dessert that she made because it's Sunday night for dinner and you're over there. But it still is you taking responsibility and ownership for the decisions that you're making. And then thirdly, we've got choice. So the choice to move on and forgive yourself. Yeah, you had a dessert. So what? What are you going to do? Let it mess up the rest of your week? Like, oh man, it's Monday and I had a dessert, so now I'm going to throw out the whole week. That is a recipe for disaster. And then fourthly is action. The only way that we can change for the long term is when we stop this cycle of guilt and blaming ourselves and blaming other people, take ownership for the choices that we're making and move on and take action to change the habits that we're making. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So here we are, roadblock number 1. So you try to change everything all at once. Likely you've done this before if you've ever been on a diet, or even when you joined the Blast Fitness Lifestyle Club, if it felt like a lot of new information right away, maybe you took on a little bit too much, right? You're trying to change all of your eating habits. We put so much pressure on ourselves that we should be able to make all of these changes. Why is it so hard for me to make all these changes? That's the victim mindset. And then we just try to change all of our eating habits at once. We don't focus on one. We want all the results. We try to change everything all at once. We also tend to place all of this importance on every aspect of nutrition. And you're like, what? But Lana, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Change everything and know exactly what to do? No, that's not the case. So the tools to succeed for avoiding you try to change everything all at once roadblock is number one, to learn the big rocks of nutrition. So these are like the biggest impact habits that you can change. We want to get to the point where we don't move on to try to change smaller habits until we've got these nailed down. So there's 4 of them. Number 1, drink 2 liters of water each day. Number 2, eat protein at every meal and snack. Number 3, prioritize veggies and low sweet fruits, apples, pears, that sort of thing, berries. And then managing our sweets and treats. So the small rocks are things like sodium intake, having like 1 square of chocolate. Do I have an apple or an orange? What vegetables are the best to eat? It doesn't freaking matter. Just eat vegetables. If you only like carrots and cauliflower, then eat those. So those are small rocks. We want to focus on the big rocks of nutrition first. And this is like the best mindset thing ever. If you've had a crazy weekend or you've been on vacation and, you've indulged a little bit more than normal, you get back on Sunday or Monday, and instead of trying to change everything, you just go water, protein, veggies, go. It's like a really quick little mantra, and then it just gets you right back on track. We don't need to stress about calories, about counting protein grams every day, about how much sodium we're eating. Get the big rocks down, trying to change one at a time, and then we'll worry about the small stuff later, even if it takes you 2 years to get to that point. So the reason why we want to focus on learning the big rocks of nutrition first is that our focus is finite. So it's much better to pick 1 to 2 habits to focus on each week rather than trying to change everything. Because as I alluded to before in my personal example, I tried to change everything and I failed miserably time and time again. And I knew I had a degree in kinesiology and took advanced nutrition. I knew what to do, but I just tried to do too much of it all at once. So slowing that process of change down makes us much more successful. So some of you are just joining on the webinar now. On the left-hand side of your control panel is a little hand. So I'm just going to ask you guys your first question. Have any of you tried to change tons of habits all at once? And have you failed at it? All you need to do is just raise your hand. Oh yeah, we got some hands. Cool. Well, you're making me feel good because now I know I'm not the only one. Great. Okay, I'm just going to lower your hands here. So we're definitely all on the same page about trying to change too many things and it just doesn't work. So the 1 change method, it's awesome. It totally works. All right, so we're moving on to roadblock number 2. You think dietary fat is making you fat. So fat is a macronutrient. That's what it is, like we talked about at the beginning of the session. It has the highest caloric load of any macronutrient at 9 calories per gram. So remember the 3 macronutrients we've got: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram, all of them, no matter what kind of carbohydrate they are. Protein also has 4 calories per gram. And then fat has 9 calories per gram. So all it means is that it's a higher caloric load and we just need to watch our portion sizes. We need dietary fat to survive. It provides energy, it supports our cells, and it assists our immune system. The other huge benefit of fat is that it helps to keep us fuller for longer. So low-fat diets often make us continually hungry and more dependent on sugar. As we know, sugar, or carbohydrates, basically we're calling them the same thing for our purposes today, have a greater effect on our fat-storing hormones than actual dietary fat. I have no idea why body fat and dietary fat are both called fat, because they're totally different things. And it's for sure messed people up for years. So if you start thinking of body fat and then dietary fat, hopefully that'll make a distinction in your brain and you won't think that fat is such a bad thing to eat, because it's not. So if I have a cookie, a fat-free cookie with sugar, it's going to spike my insulin levels, right? When my insulin levels go up, I tend to store more body fat. And then and let's say that cookie is 200 calories, okay? And then let's say I eat a whole avocado, and that avocado is 200 calories. Well, that avocado is going to keep me fuller for longer, and it's going to give me all of these great essential fats that I need for cell processes, and it's not going to spike my insulin. So I'm not going to hold on to fat because of the hormonal response. So can you see the difference between sugar and carbohydrates and their effect on hormones versus fat? Fat is basically what we call hormonally neutral. It doesn't have a huge effect on our fat storing hormones. So fat also keeps us fuller for longer versus carbohydrates. We do have some quote unquote bad fats and good fats. So the bad fats are things like trans fats. These are made when we heat some of the man-made oils or plant oils to really, really high temperatures. So we're more likely to find trans fats in processed foods like cookies, some like French fries and potato chips and that sort of thing. Those fats don't offer a ton of energy, and they are really bad for our health. Then the good fats are the naturally occurring fats. So like unsaturated fats, which are found in fish, avocados, and nuts and seeds. And then even saturated fat. For years, we thought saturated fat was really bad. So this is found in butter, some higher fat dairy, even, regular ground beef or a steak if there's fat on the side. That's saturated fat. Cheese also has saturated fat. So basically, we thought for years that saturated fat was going to clog our arteries and give us heart attacks. Inactivity does way more, and smoking, do way more damage on our arteries than eating saturated fat. So whether you choose to have margarine or butter, it's totally your own choice. Basically, what we're finding out is that saturated fat, like butter, is not as bad as we thought it was. The thing is, it's still really high in calories because fat has 9 calories per gram. So we just need to watch how much fat we eat. So how much fat should we eat in a day? It depends on the person, on the time of the month, and your activity level. So we want about 30% of our overall calories to come from fat. So for most people, that's going to be 2 to 3 servings of fat a day. That could be like half an avocado and a serving of fish, or some nuts as a snack and some olive oil in your salad dressing, or some hemp seeds in your smoothie and some olives on your salad, that sort of thing. Or cheese on your salad. That's cool too. All right, so tools to succeed with giving up the you think fat is going to make you fat mindset. We want to just avoid worrying about putting butter and oil on our vegetables. This is a perfect example of a small rock. A small rock meaning it's not that big of a deal. It's better to just eat the frickin' vegetables. If the other option is like having French fries or broccoli with butter on it, eat the broccoli with butter on it. Why? It's going to have a less effect on your fat storing hormones, and it's way more satisfying to eat broccoli with butter on it, isn't it? Yeah. So we do want to use dietary fat daily, and we want to find foods that are satisfying in relatively small amounts. So some examples are nuts, cheese, or bacon. This is going to be totally individual. Another personal example here. So I don't find nuts to be really satisfying. Like for me, 10 almonds versus 50 almonds is kind of the same thing. Stopping at 10 is not going to make me feel any more or less satisfied than going to all the way to 50. So I don't eat a ton of nuts. They're not the greatest food for me because I find it harder to control the amount that I eat. You may or may not agree. It's totally cool, whatever works for you. Cheese and bacon are things that I find in really small amounts help me to stay really satisfied with the foods that I'm eating. So an example of this would be like if I put 2 pieces of real bacon, chopped it up, and then put it on my salad. I eat that salad for dinner, maybe with some chicken thrown in there as well. And then after dinner, I'm not like, oh my God, I need to eat a huge chocolate bar to feel satisfied. That amount of dietary fat, yeah, it's saturated in the bacon, is giving me that satisfaction for a low amount of calories because I'm only having 2 pieces. And it tastes great, right? Then I can imagine having that salad every single day, or at least regularly. And then I just put in a little quote I found: a life without cheese is not a life at all. If you're lactose intolerant, you can just insert bacon into that quote and you'll get it. Okay, moving on to roadblock number 3. You put too much value on the plan. So basically what this means is, deep down inside, you might think that there's a perfect plan out there. You just have to find it. There's this perfect diet or way of eating or protocol that you can follow that's just going to be the answer to all your prayers. Oh, I hate to burst your bubble, but it just doesn't exist. The only plan that's ever going to work for you is the one that you create with trial and error and is totally, perfectly individual. You are unlike anyone else. Your likes, your metabolism, your genetics, your energy levels, all of those sorts of things, the foods you like to eat are all different. So there is no plan out there that's going to be perfect for you other than the one that you find and create for yourself. Yes, it takes more effort, but it's totally worth it. Another roadblock for number 3 is with putting too much value on the plan is that you think that you just need to be more disciplined to follow this theoretical plan that you've got in your head. An example of this for me would be like, oh, I'm not going to eat sugar. I've said that to myself a million times. So I would think I just need to be more disciplined in order to be on this plan of not eating sugar. And for me, that's just an unsustainable practice. It's not going to last forever. On my birthday, I want to eat birthday cake. I want to have chocolate during the week, and it's going to happen, and you can still see great results with that. So it's not about being more disciplined. It's about finding a plan that gives you results, and there's some relief built into that plan. And then finally, we guilt our way into action because we think that this perfect plan actually does exist, when in actual fact, it doesn't. So tools to succeed with this roadblock. Number 1, we want to accept responsibility. So we've talked about this before when we introduced the victim mindset. We want to create responsibility for our actions, our thoughts, and our words. Just like I was telling you, when I would put external blame on my significant other, like, oh, he wants to go for ice cream, and I would feel pressure that I needed to have ice cream, or I would just want to have ice cream because who goes to an ice cream parlor and doesn't want an ice cream cone? Well, I practiced being like, no, I don't really need ice cream today, but maybe tomorrow I'll have it. And so then it just allows you to march to the beat of your own drum and find out what really works for you. Another thing to remember is that a coach, so me in your case, I'm here to guide you, but I can't do the work for you. So I can give you tools and ideas to help you on your journey to success. But even if I met with you 1 hour every single day, I tell this to my personal training clients, and we worked out for an hour every day of the week. Let's just pretend. There's still 23 hours in the day when you're on your own. And if you don't get to the point of just taking full responsibility for all of your actions and all of your choices and your habits that have been created over years, there's going to be no long-term solution. So it's not about feeling bad about them and judging yourself for them, because we know that guilt is not going to help us to make better decisions in the long run. It's just accepting the responsibility. It is what it is. You got to get to that point before you can create space to make positive change. We also want to adopt this you know best mindset. So yeah, I've got lots of ideas to help you change your eating habit and exercising habits. And that's my job, to be here to educate you. but then it's your job to craft the mindset and pick and choose the things that are really going to work for you. And then finally, we want to find ways that we can be in action. Trial and error. That's how you get through this. That's how you find the plan that works for you. Maybe you try the 12-hour fasting period and it just totally doesn't work. And then a 10-hour fasting period works for you. Maybe there's one girl on the group. She's like, you know what? You tell us to eat carbs at breakfast, and I just don't want to eat carbs at breakfast. I want them at lunch. I'm like, cool. That's great. That is finding out your own plan. Some people don't want to have cheese. That's great too. Everyone's got different things that you're going to fit into your plan. Or maybe you don't love lifting weights. So, getting that strength training in twice a week is really challenging for you. Well, then you're going to maybe hire a trainer or, come on the group and get more motivation with the stuff that's really hard, and then know that you love going for a run instead. So that's going to be the easier stuff for you to do on a regular basis. And you just practice with the weightlifting, for example. We need to harness some resiliency, some patience, and some strength in order to be successful with this idea of creating our own plan in the long term. Because if you think that it's going to happen quickly, it won't. It's going to take a while, and it happens bit by bit, right? You make breakthroughs and you're like, oh my gosh, this really works. My pants are feeling a little bit more loose because I'm making better choices at breakfast. And you just chip away, and months and years go by, and you're able to maintain your results. And that is totally worthwhile. On to roadblock number 4. So you think that you need to be strict in order to get good results. So deep down, you might think that you cannot get great results by having cheese on your salad or a glass of wine or a piece of chocolate. Like, you really need to be more strict in order to see some results. That's what we think, right? It's totally not true. We tend to fall into this, I can always be doing more, or I can always be doing better mindset. All this leads to is obsession with the process. It's not fun, and it creates negative self-talk. So, well, if I'm trying to eat healthy, then I may as well just not have any sugar at all. And that whole idea of perfection is just really, really short-sighted. Here are our tools for success with giving up this mindset. So how about this? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So perfect would be like good, who knows? Honestly, there's no perfect way of eating, but let's just pretend that, it's having lean protein and leafy greens at every single meal with no dressing, no cheese or bacon on there. It's not going to last, right? And so we're going to fall off that train. So therefore, that idea of perfect is the enemy of good eating. Good eating is having vegetables regularly, having enough protein, having some water, and finding balance, having a couple treats along the way. And that would be good. And you can maintain good a lot more time and a longer period of time than you can maintain perfect. So what's the point of trying to be perfect? Success really is defined, in my opinion, as long-term maintenance of our results. So we need to strive for enjoyment of the process, because if we don't enjoy the process, if we don't like our workouts and we don't like the food we're eating, it is not going to last. And if it does last for a short amount of time, you're going to be seriously unhappy while you're doing it. Creating these sustainable life habits is how we get lifestyle change. When we get to the point of thinking that this is a lifestyle change, it becomes effortless, and it just happens. It doesn't take as much conscious effort. We don't feel like we need to use willpower as much, and that is true success. Another tool to succeed with giving up the I need to be strict idea is that deprivation does lead to overindulgence. So if you've ever restricted yourself before, you probably got to the point of thinking, I can't take this anymore. And then either you're like me and you're like, I'm going to eat every sweet thing in the entire house. Or you just go off the deep end and you just can't maintain it anymore. The thing is, deprivation sucks, right? It's not very fun to totally deprive yourself of the foods that you like, even if that's like a latte. It doesn't have to be a chocolate bar, of course. But eating everything in your cupboards also doesn't feel good, right? Because that's like totally out of control. And then we feel really crappy physically and mentally after. So the answer is finding that moderation right in the middle. Oh, I don't want to go there yet. So the thing with moderation is that we kind of think that moderation is like, okay, it's like so simple, like that's something your grandma could do, right? Like it's not going to give us the results we want. And it's totally not true. Moderation, or having a moderate approach, so allowing yourself some treats sometimes and not trying to eat perfectly and then end up failing all the time, it gives us slower results, but results that actually last. So that's what moderation basically means. On to our last roadblock. Our last roadblock number 5, is that you think you have no control over your sweet tooth. These are things that that characterize this mindset. You act as if this is the last dessert on earth. Oh my God, I need to eat this dessert. I might never get dessert again. I hope you're laughing because I seriously have felt like that before. But there are starving children in the world. I have to finish everything on my plate. Now, listen, there are starving children in the world. There are even starving children in the cities that we're living in. But you eating every single thing on your plate is not going to change that, right? Going out and volunteering or supporting these great organizations, that's going to make a difference for the starving children of the world. You don't need to eat every single thing on your plate if you're full in order to help them. The third one is, but I really enjoy food, Lana. I like food. Yeah, so do I. I love food. And there were lots of years when I weighed a lot heavier than I do now. And I ate more than I do now. And I didn't make as great of choices. And you know what? I don't think that I enjoyed food more. I think I was more of a slave to food then because I hadn't found the balance that I needed to create. So enjoying food that's great if you enjoy food. That's awesome. When we can find that balance with eating enough treats that we feel satisfied, but not so many that we feel crappy physically and mentally, that's the true holy grail. And then finally, you've tried to eat no sugar and have failed. And what I would ask you about that is it really realistic to eat no sugar? Is it? I would argue no. Your answer can be different though. There's room for all opinions here. So, tools for success on roadblock number 5. Knowing your trigger times. So for most people, this is going to be after lunch or dinner. We want to try to use willpower in these moments. The issue with using willpower is that willpower is an exhaustible resource. It's not always going to be there for you. It's like a fickle friend. It does get stronger with practice, but it tends to wear off and be less reliable at the end of the day. That's why most people tend to eat really well throughout the day, and then after work is the toughest time for them to make good decisions, or even after dinner. So we have this idea of riding the craving wave. So a craving usually lasts like 20 to 30 minutes. So there are different tools that we can use to overcome our cravings. You can distract yourself. This could be like going out for a walk, having a glass of water, calling a friend, having a hot bath is something I do a lot because it feels really good, but it's not eating something. And then finally, practicing mindfulness around the foods that we're choosing. So if it's a habit that after dinner you always have something sweet, basically adopting this idea of being aware of what you're doing is the first step that you need to break that habit. And then we practice 2 sort of versions. Version 1 of saying no to treats after dinner is we don't keep them in the house. So if they're really struggling with it, just don't keep them in the house. And then after dinner, you're searching for something and there's nothing there. And then version 2 is keeping things in the house, but exposing yourself to it and just practicing saying no, right? If you're at the point where you're like, I will never be able to do that, don't stress. It's all good. It takes practice. And you got to do version 1 first. So if you're really struggling and you're always eating treats after dinner, go to version 1, take the treats out of your cupboard or do your best to remove yourself away from them. Then try version 2. The next tool for success is creating this mindset shift and this idea that in this day and age, You can actually get a treat anywhere at any time. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure there's a gas station open that you could get a chocolate bar. So knowing that a treat is always available to you is actually like a real relief. Then we don't have to act like this is the last dessert on earth. I have to eat it. I might never have the opportunity again to have the creme brulee or whatever it is. Yeah, you will have lots of opportunities in the rest of your life to have treats. So practice saying no. Put some time and space in between you and the treats, and then you won't feel like these treats have such a hold on you. This mindset of you can get a treat anywhere, anytime has been a huge game changer for me, because it makes you feel like you've got a little bit more control, and it's not like you're going to miss out, like FOMO about treats, fear of missing out about the treats, right? All right, moving on to more tools for success on how to manage your sweet tooth. Treat meals. This totally works for some people. So examples of this would be like on a Wednesday or a Saturday, you allow yourself to eat whatever you want. This approach doesn't work for me because I really don't like labeling foods good and bad. I don't want to think that pizza is bad, because then when I'm eating pizza, it's like, oh, this is a bad food. No, pizza, this is my opinion, pizza is not bad. It's just a food. It just is what it is. It's going to give you a certain type of results, just like eating chicken and a salad is going to give you certain types of results. So treat meals work for some people. If you operate kind of more on a like black and white or on and off approach, and you want to be like, yeah, pizza is bad for me, and I'm going to eat it, that's cool. You can do that. And then if you can get back on track on the next meal or snack, then this approach can work for you, and it can help you manage your sweet tooth. You're like, I'm saving it up for Saturday night. I'm going to have whatever I want. And then it's back on track on Sunday. Try it. Trial and error. It's the only way to figure it out. If you know that doesn't work for you, then you can do more of the approach that I tend to follow, which is the preemptive treats. So I allow myself to have a treat before I get to the point of like chewing my arm off because I've deprived myself. I don't want to live with deprivation, so I just find smaller, really satisfying treats, or they're not all sugar related, foods that really satisfy me. So I don't feel like I need to have a chocolate bar and a glass of wine and, popcorn and chips and all these pizza on Friday night. I can handle one glass of wine and be good with it. So preemptive treats, they're not going to help us lose weight, but they're also not going to cause us to gain weight. So it's like that neutral zone, right? But neutral's good. Neutral helps us to last. Being in that place of you're only making decisions that are like helping you with weight loss is super short-term mentality. We want to go long-term mentality. So you're making really good decisions all day, and then you have a little treat and it helps you stick on the plan, right? Like if I have a square of dark chocolate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, yeah, I'm totally good at eating something really nutritious and delicious like asparagus and a steak for dinner, because that is nutritious. Or bacon or cheese or wine, right? Smaller portions. That's the key to preemptive treats. It's not going to get us where we want to go if we're having them every day or if we're having them in huge amounts. So like every second to third day, like 3 to 4 times a week is a good practice for the preemptive treats. They prevent us from going all out later. And then another little way of doing the preemptive treats is like you're out for dinner with friends and they're ordering dessert. As long as they're good at sharing with you, then this one works. And that's try 3 polite bites. So let's say there's a piece of chocolate cake. Now you're saying, well, how big is the bite? A polite bite. So if it's someone else's cake, you're not going out there with your spoon and taking a huge chunk out of it. You're taking a little. That's a polite bite. Go for 3 polite bites and you're good. You got to taste. If it tastes really good, drink a sip of water and you're moving on. All right, so our take-home messages from today are that we need some nutrition education to succeed. We can't go in and find results if we don't know anything, right? But we do know that once we know better, we tend to do better. But we also need some mindset work to create a successful lifestyle change, because mindset work is going to be the thing that helps us to stay in action, because knowledge doesn't equal transformation. Just because we know what to do, it doesn't actually mean that we're going to do it. We need education, then we need the mindset shifts to help us actually stay in action with it. And then thirdly, the victim mindset Happens all the time. You might start to notice it more in your life, showing up in relationships now, and your relationship with food, because that's a relationship. The victim mindset, it just leaves us with no power to be in action about making positive changes in our life. So we want to be aware, make no judgments of us playing the victim, because we're all going to do it from time to time, and then just be in action about how we can change and create those healthy, positive habits. And then finally, the best plan is the one that works in your life. It's not going to be the same as mine. It's not going to be the same as your significant others or your best friends. It's going to be what works for you. And we get there through trial and error and resiliency. All right, you guys, we're on to questions. Holy moly, I hope you enjoyed that. So what you can do is on your control panel, you're going to see a spot that says questions. So what you can do is if you have a question right now that you want to type in, I will answer it. We're going to spend about 5 minutes here answering questions, and then we'll wrap it up and I'll get this recording off to you in your email. So let's see what we got here. Got some questions coming up. Awesome. Okay, so what is the difference between a complex carb, a starchy complex carb, and a starchy carb? So a starchy complex carb is basically more of a whole food. So think like oats, quinoa, yams, that sort of thing. And then a refined starchy carb would be something like a muffin or a pastry or a candy, right? Like it's got that higher sugar content, but it's been processed a little bit more. So obviously we want to prioritize the starchy complex carbs over the starchy refined carbs, right? All right, next one. How many servings of fat to eat? So we've got one person saying, I eat about 5 to 6 servings of fat instead of 2 or 3. Is that bad? You know what? As we know, fat does have more calories, right? So perhaps decreasing the amount of fat that you've been eating and inserting some more of those volume foods, right? Like some more proteins, maybe adding another egg because there's a little bit less calories, but you're still going to be full enough that you're not starving. So scale back, go down to like 3 to 4 servings of fat instead of 5 to 6. Try it. See where you can make changes that aren't going to affect your satisfaction. So like for me, where I tend to get a lot of my fat is like from olive oil on salad dressing. Well, I'm not going to not have salad dressing on my salad because I don't think it's satisfying. So that would be an example. Dun, dun, dun. Any more questions? What if I've been dieting for a long time? How has that affected my metabolism? Oh, best question. Okay. So yeah, long-term dieting does really affect our metabolism, right? Because if we've been like restricting calories for a really long time, our body is tending to release more cortisol because it thinks we're operating in this like starvation mode. Don't stress about it. Your metabolism is really resilient as long as you start to eat a lot of the right things. This is a perfect example of where we want to include the volume food. So like huge salads, tons of vegetables on your plate, fruit as snacks, and not being scared to eat lots of volume foods. So chicken, eggs, vegetables, fruit, all that kind of stuff, because your body needs to work to break that down, and that costs you calories, right? So don't stress about this. There are tons of people out there who have dieted for a really long time, and their metabolism might not be super responsive, but when you start to get more volume foods in your body's like, whoa, I got to kick up into high gear here. Like I got to be breaking down this food so that I can get it through my digestive tract. And then it's using a lot of energy breaking those foods down versus storing or holding on to all of the foods that you're giving it when you're controlling how many calories that you're eating. Any more questions? Excellent. Okay, guys. So that is it. that's the end of our webinar for tonight. So I'm just going to get you quickly. If you enjoyed what you heard, or if you learned at least one new thing, can you raise your hand for me? Can you raise your hand if you learned something and you enjoyed yourself? And then we can even do this again sometime. Oh, this is so cool. You're having fun. Okay, I'm going to sign off for the evening and get this recording out to you guys via email. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to ask you more questions and more feedback so that we can talk about more stuff to make another webinar in the future. Thanks for coming.